You won't believe what happens when a young girl is framed for a crime she didn't commit, betrayed by her own family. Watch as the truth unfolds, exposing a web of lies, and witness the stunning rise of a woman who turns betrayal into the ultimate victory. Stay tuned. This is a story you don't want to miss. In the peaceful village of Ndala, where the air always smelled of fresh earth and ripe mangoes, life moved slowly and simply. Birds sang at dawn, elders told stories under baobab trees, and children played by the riverbanks. Among the villagers was a young girl named Naria. She lived in a small clay house near the edge of the forest, where her late mother once grew healing herbs. Her mother had been a well-known herbalist, a woman of wisdom and warmth, loved by all. Though she passed when Naria was very young, people often said Naria had her spirit. She was calm, humble, and always willing to help, even when her own hands were tired. Everyone in the village loved Naria. She would carry heavy loads for old women in the market, help the younger children fetch water, and sit with lonely elders just to keep them company. She had no fancy clothes or shiny jewelry, but her heart was pure gold. The women admired her gentleness, the men respected her honesty, even the animals seemed to love her. Her quiet smile brought peace wherever she went. But in places where the sun shines too brightly, shadows are never far behind. One day, everything started to change. Her father, Mansa, who had been lonely for years after his wife's death, decided it was time to remarry. The village whispered with curiosity when a woman named Oruni came to live in their home. She was elegant, with sharp eyes, and a voice that could slice through silence. Along with her came her daughter, Zalima, a girl just a little older than Naria, with skin like polished bronze, and eyes that flickered with something cold and hidden. At first, things seemed fine. The village welcomed the new family, and Naria, always kind, accepted them with open arms. She shared her space, her clothes, even her favorite cooking pots. But behind Zalima's smile was a storm brewing. She noticed how the villagers adored Naria, how her father spoke kindly of her, and how she moved through the village like a gentle breeze. Zalima began to feel like a shadow, invisible next to her stepsister's quiet light. She didn't want to be second. She didn't want to be overlooked. And slowly, her smile turned fake, her kindness turned sharp, and her eyes grew heavy with jealousy. Naria didn't notice at first. She kept being herself, soft, helpful, and full of hope. But the peace she had always known was beginning to crumble, and the quiet village of Ndala was about to witness a storm wrapped in sweet smiles and poisonous lies. Because sometimes evil doesn't come with thunder. Sometimes it walks in with laughter and hides behind family. The wedding of Mansa and Oruni was a grand affair in the village of Ndala. Colourful fabrics swayed in the breeze, drums echoed through the trees, and the air was filled with the scent of spices and roasted meats. The villagers danced and cheered, happy to see Mansa, a respected woodworker and widower, find love again. And by his side was Oruni, a tall, graceful woman with striking features and a voice that always sounded like it was hiding something. She brought with her a daughter, Zelima, who walked like she owned every path and looked at people like they were beneath her sandals. At first glance, Zelima was breathtaking. Her skin glowed in the sun, her braided hair swung with pride, and she smiled wide, but never from the heart. The village boys whispered about her beauty, but the elders watched her with quiet suspicion. They knew beauty was not always the same as goodness. Naria, with her warm nature, welcomed her new stepmother and stepsister with open arms. She helped them settle in, shared her late mother's cooking recipes, and even gave up her room for Zalima without a word. But Zalima didn't want kindness. She wanted attention, power, and the admiration Naria had earned without even trying. And it burned her inside every time someone praised her stepsister. She watched how the old women of the market smiled wider when Naria passed, how the chief's wife asked for her help, how the young men looked at her, not with lust, but with respect. Zalima, who had always been the center of her own little world, couldn't stand being in Naria's shadow. One night, as the moonlight spilled into their small courtyard, Zalima sat with her mother, bitterness thick in her voice. They treat her like a princess. I won't be her shadow forever. Oruni's eyes narrowed as she looked toward the house, her voice cold and sharp. Then don't. Take what should have been yours. It was in that moment that the seed of betrayal took root. From then on, their smiles at Naria were no longer genuine. They began to whisper when she entered the room, hide things, and give her extra chores under the excuse of teaching her obedience. Mansa, always busy with his woodwork and trusting in his wife's words, didn't see the slow poison growing inside his home. Zalima had made up her mind. She wouldn't live under Naria's light any longer. She didn't want to share. She didn't want to earn love. She wanted to steal it. And with Oruni's encouragement, she began to plot. Because when jealousy finds a voice, it whispers lies louder than truth. And soon, Ndala would witness just how far envy could go when wrapped in a pretty smile. Zalima's jealousy grew like weeds in a farmer's field, fast, wild, and hard to stop. She started small. One morning, Naria woke up to find her favorite dress missing, the one her mother had sewn before she passed. A week later, her handmade clay pots, shaped carefully for market day, were smashed into pieces behind the house. Naria would pause, stare at the damage with quiet eyes, and then simply sweep the mess away, saying nothing. She never pointed fingers, never shouted, never accused. Instead, she kept helping around the house, kept smiling, and kept walking through the village with the same gentle heart. That's what confused Zalima the most. Why didn't Naria fight back? Why didn't she scream? Why didn't she cry? It was as if her peace was a shield Zalima couldn't break, and that made her even angrier. Zalima didn't stop at things. She started spilling lies like water from a broken pot. In the market, she whispered to sellers that Naria had cursed a woman's tomatoes. At the river, she told girls that Naria thought she was better than everyone else. Slowly, small doubts began to trickle through the village. Some people believed her, others didn't, but Naria, as always, stayed quiet, letting truth be her answer. One old woman, watching Naria gently bandage a child's scraped knee, leaned to her friend and said, "That girl, even the moon envies her calm." Zalima heard that, and it was the final straw. She didn't want calm. She didn't want kind. She wanted the praise, the attention, the respect. She wanted to be the one everyone talked about, and in her mind, that could only happen if Naria disappeared from the picture completely. She began to plan. No more broken pots. No more whispers. This time, she would strike where it hurt the most. Zalima knew the villagers loved honesty, and nothing turned a community faster than the word thief. If she could make them believe Naria had stolen something important, the shame would bury her like dust in the wind. So she started watching, waiting, planning her move like a lion waiting in tall grass. Because to Zalima, this wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was war. A silent, bitter war where only one sister could remain standing. And the kind heart of Naria, so open and full of light, had no idea the storm was about to hit. The morning sun had barely kissed the roofs of Ndala when a piercing scream shattered the peace. It came from Oruni's hut. Birds flew from trees, children dropped their morning yams, and neighbors peeked over fences. Oruni was shrieking like a woman possessed, her arms waving, her face red with fury. "My necklace! My mother's necklace is gone," she cried, stomping into the yard. "The one with the blue stones, worth more than anything in this house." People gathered fast. A crowd formed as Oruni paced, clutching her head. The necklace she spoke of was no ordinary ornament. It had belonged to her grandmother, passed down from generation to generation, made of thick gold links and tiny, rare blue stones that sparkled like river water. It was the only thing Oruni ever truly cared about. Zalima ran from the house, eyes wide. "Mama, what happened?" she asked, pretending to be shocked. Oruni pulled her close, whispering through gritted teeth. Then suddenly, Zalima gasped, as if an idea had struck her. Wait, maybe it fell under something. She walked slowly, deliberately, across the compound. Everyone's eyes followed her as she made her way to Naria's mat, near the small veranda. Naria stood to the side, confused but calm. Zalima knelt, lifted the mat carefully, and gasped again. "Mama, come see this." From beneath the mat, she pulled out the missing necklace. The crowd around them fell into stunned silence. A few gasps, a couple of murmurs, then a storm of whispers. Oruni snatched the necklace from Zalima's hand, clutching it like a newborn. "I knew it!" she bellowed. "I knew that girl had snake blood." Zalima dropped to her knees, tears flowing from eyes that knew exactly what they were doing. "I didn't want to believe it," she sobbed. "But look, it was right here." Naria stared at them in complete shock. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She stepped forward, eyes wide, heart pounding. "I didn't do this," she whispered, voice cracking. "I swear on my mother's grave, I've never even touched that necklace." Oruni's face twisted with rage. "Liar! Thief!" she screamed. "You live under my roof, and this is how you repay me?" Naria looked around. but no one stepped forward to defend her. The villagers stared, unsure what to believe. The quiet girl they'd known for years, accused of theft. The shame felt like fire on her skin. She didn't even know how to explain herself, because the truth was, she had never seen that necklace before. Zelima turned away, biting her lip to hide the smirk trying to escape. Her plan was working, and Naria, sweet, innocent Naria, was about to lose everything. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the village of Endala, a loud murmur stirred the air. Mansa, weary from a long day at the farm, returned to find an unusual crowd gathered outside his compound. Faces were tense, eyes full of curiosity, and whispers flew like dust in the wind. Confused, he dropped his hoe and pushed through the crowd, only to find Naria standing alone, head bowed, eyes glistening, with Aruni and Zelima standing triumphantly across from her. Zelima stepped forward, tears streaking her cheeks in perfect lines. "I trusted her like a sister," she cried, her voice cracking with practiced pain. "I never imagined she'd betray us like this. I defended her when people gossiped. I even gave her my clothes, and she hides Mama's necklace under her mat." Aruni stood behind her, arms folded, nodding slowly like a judge at a public trial. The golden necklace glimmered in her hand, the so-called proof of betrayal. Mansa looked at Naria, his daughter, his first child, the last living piece of his late wife. Confusion battled against heartbreak in his eyes. "Naria," he said quietly, "is it true?" Naria raised her head slowly. "Baba, I swear, I've never seen that necklace before. Someone put it there." But the crowd was hungry for scandal. Murmurs turned to words. Words turned to judgment. "Such disgrace," someone muttered. "From her? The girl we all respected. She fooled us all." Mansa clenched his jaw. His heart was heavy, his mind clouded. He looked at the necklace, then at Naria, then at the villagers surrounding him, their eyes pressing him for a decision. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and hollow. "Until the gods show me otherwise. Naria, leave my house." The words sliced through Naria like a knife. She froze for a moment, not believing what she had just heard. But no one stepped in. Not a single voice rose in her defense. The home she grew up in, where her mother once sang lullabies, was no longer hers. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply picked up a small satchel, one she had packed long ago, perhaps sensing her time there was ticking. With only a wrapper wrapped around her and no sandals on her feet, Naria stepped past the crowd. Eyes followed her, some filled with pity, most with suspicion. "She brought shame on herself," a woman whispered. She had everyone fooled. But at the edge of the crowd, standing silently with his walking stick, was Baba Kwame, the village's retired teacher. He had watched it all quietly. His old eyes, sharper than most, hadn't missed the flicker in Zalima's expression, or the way Naria didn't defend herself with drama, only truth. He didn't say a word, not yet. But in his heart, he knew something wasn't right. And if no one else would uncover the truth, he would. With the sun beating down and her feet aching on the rough ground, Naria walked with no destination. Her wrapper was dusty, her hands trembling, and her heart broken. Every step away from her father's compound felt like a wound reopening. She had been thrown out like a criminal, yet her only crime was being too quiet to fight back. She wandered until her legs gave way near the edge of the village, beside a lonely, weathered hut. It belonged to Baba Kwame, the old teacher who had watched everything in silence. The door creaked open, and the old man stood there, leaning on his cane. He looked at her with eyes full of wisdom, not pity. "Child," he said softly, "the truth is like the sun. It can hide behind clouds, but it never disappears." Without question, he brought her inside. The hut was small, filled with books, dried herbs, and memories. Baba Kwame offered her food and a corner to sleep. It wasn't much, but to Naria it felt like a palace. For the first time since her mother died, someone saw her without judgment. Days passed. The pain in her heart still lingered, but she began to heal slowly, through the silence, the kindness, and the dirt beneath her fingernails. Baba Kwame gave her tasks in his garden. She planted yams, fetched water, and listened to his stories about justice, patience, and the way the gods work in silence. Meanwhile, back at the compound, Zelima walked like a queen. With Naria gone, she had everything: attention, praise, and her mother's constant applause. Villagers praised her fake tears and believed her crocodile sorrow. She wore new wrappers, smiled at boys who used to admire Naria, and laughed louder than ever. One evening, Zelima stood in front of the compound, looking at the same villagers, who once praised her stepsister. Now the light is all mine, she whispered to herself, touching the necklace she had planted in Naria's mat. But the wind in Ndala shifted. Birds flew oddly quiet. The trees rustled with secrets. The gods were not sleeping. They had watched Naria's silence. They had seen Zalima's lies. And though Naria now lived far from her father's home, the truth was beginning to stir beneath the surface. Something was coming. Something no lie could bury. Because when the sun rises again, it shines on everything. A week before the chaos began, before Naria was shamed and banished, Baba Kwame had visited Mansa's home. He often brought herbs for Mansa's back pain and small gifts from his garden. That day, however, he carried something different, something the villagers had never seen before. A traveller passing through Ndala had once gifted Baba Kwame a strange device, a small solar-powered camera, telling him it could see and remember. Baba, curious as always, decided to test it. He tucked the little camera into a woven basket on a shelf in the corner of Mansa's compound. Hidden among calabashes and dried spices, no one noticed it. He didn't know what it would capture. He simply wanted to see if it worked. Days passed. The sun charged the device. It sat silently, watching everything like a silent witness. Then, the day of the necklace incident came. The screaming, the accusations, the heartbreak. Baba Kwame, though old and slow, had hurried to the edge of the crowd, watching as Naria was thrown out. His heart ached, but he said nothing. Yet, something inside him urged patience. That night, he remembered the camera. With shaking hands, he retrieved the device and sat down under his oil lamp. The screen flickered. The footage rolled. At first, there was nothing but normal scenes. Naria sweeping, Aruni gossiping, Zelima painting her nails. But then, the image changed. He leaned forward. There was Zalima. She moved quietly, looking around. Her eyes darted like a snake in tall grass. In her hands, she held the blue and gold necklace. Baba Kwame watched as she tiptoed to Naria's mat, lifted the corner, and carefully tucked the necklace beneath it. Her lips curled into a wicked smile before she walked away, pretending nothing had happened. Baba Kwame's mouth fell open. He leaned back, stunned. "So," he whispered, "the snake shows its skin at last." He paused the footage, staring at the screen. The proof, the truth, the very thing that could restore Naria's name and bring justice to a house ruled by lies. But he didn't act right away. No, Baba Kwame was an old man who believed in the right moment. Timing, he had always said, was the sharpest arrow. Now, the arrow was ready, and the liar was about to face the truth she never saw coming. The next morning, as the sun broke through the heavy clouds, Baba Kwame gathered Mansa and a few elders of the village in a small clearing near his hut. The air was thick with anticipation, and the villagers gathered quietly, wondering what Baba Kwame had to show them. With a solemn look, Baba Kwame connected the camera to a small projector. The screen flickered to life, revealing the events of the past week, the same moments the village had witnessed, but now with undeniable clarity. The footage began. Zalima appeared first, creeping into her mother's room, her movements cautious, deliberate. She reached for the priceless family necklace, her fingers gliding over the smooth gold and blue stones. The camera captured her every step as she held the necklace tightly, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Baba Kwame paused the footage briefly, his voice steady but filled with intensity. "Look closely," he said to the gathered villagers. "This is the truth. Watch carefully." The screen continued, showing Zalima walking towards Naria's mat. She crouched down, lifting the corner, and slyly slid the necklace beneath it. The camera caught the exact moment she smiled, then quickly walked away, blending back into the shadows as if nothing had happened. The room was deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Mansa stood up, his face pale and his heart racing. He had trusted Zalima, had called her his daughter, but now the truth hung like a storm cloud over his family. A low murmur spread through the villagers, and then an elder stood up, his voice filled with outrage. "Zalima, daughter of deceit," he declared, his voice booming. "You brought shame upon an innocent soul." Zalima's face turned ashen. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her mind scrambled, trying to find a way to explain, to twist the story, but the undeniable truth was there, clear for everyone to see. She looked at her mother, but Aruni, who had once been her ally, now stood silent, unable to defend her. I didn't know," Aruni stammered, her voice weak, barely a whisper. The elder woman, standing with unwavering strength, turned to Oruni and said, "You banished light and praised darkness. Shame on both of you." The words hit harder than any slap. Oruni's face flushed with guilt, and tears began to well up in her eyes. The truth, so cruel and unrelenting, had shattered everything. There was no place for lies in the light of justice. As Zalima stood there, trembling, her eyes filled with regret, she realized too late that the price of deception was far higher than she ever imagined. The village now knew. The truth had unfolded, and it was more powerful than any lie could ever be. The air was thick with anticipation when Naria returned to the village. The whispers started long before the palanquin was even visible, carried by the strong, eager hands of the youth who had once witnessed her disgrace. Today, they were honored to carry her, Naria, the girl wronged but unbroken. Her face, though soft with tears, was filled with a quiet strength. She was not just returning, she was reclaiming her dignity. As the palanquin approached Mansa's compound, the crowd fell silent, watching the woman who had been cast out now come back, not as a victim, but as a victor. Naria's eyes met Mansa's, and in that moment, all the years of pain, confusion, and heartbreak melted away. He rushed forward, tears streaming down his face, his hands trembling as he knelt before her. I am sorry, my daughter," Mansa whispered, his voice breaking. "Forgive a father blinded by lies." The crowd gasped. This was the man who had once cast her out, the man who had been deceived. Now, on his knees before his own daughter, he begged for forgiveness. Naria's heart ached for him, but she was not angry, not anymore. She knelt beside him, lifting him gently with her hands. "My pain is past, Baba," she said, her voice steady and calm. "But let the truth cleanse this house." With those words, the healing began, not just for her, but for the family. Naria's kindness, her strength in the face of cruelty, became the light that filled the room, casting away the shadows that had once held her family in their grip. Zalima and Oruni, the ones who had betrayed her, stood a few paces away, eyes downcast, their faces pale. The truth had exposed them for who they truly were. There was no place left for them in the village they had once called home. The elders spoke with authority, their voices firm, as they decreed that Zalima and Oruni would be banished from the compound. "Let them seek their own way," the elder said. "There is no room for dishonesty here." And so, it was done. Zalima and Oruni were cast out, their belongings packed into simple bundles. They left the village, no longer welcome in the place where they had once thrived on lies and deception. They wandered far, eventually reaching a distant village where no one knew their names. There, they became nothing more than beggars, forgotten by the world. As they disappeared into the distance, the villagers watched, some with pity, others with cold indifference. It was the end of their reign, the end of their manipulation. But for Naria, it was a new beginning. The truth had set her free, and now she would help rebuild her family, one piece at a time. Her strength had saved them all. Years passed, and the once quiet and oppressed Naria became a beacon of hope and strength in Endala. She had risen from the ashes of betrayal and rejection to become the head of the village's women's council. Naria, with her wisdom and kindness, now guided the women of Endala, offering them a platform where their voices could be heard. Under her leadership, the village flourished, but Naria's true passion lay in the young girls of the village, those abandoned, neglected, or forgotten. Determined to make sure no girl ever faced the same fate she had, Naria opened a home for abandoned girls. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary where they could grow, learn, and heal. She taught them everything, from reading and writing to how to cultivate the land and the importance of self-respect. But most of all, she instilled in them the values that had guided her own journey: kindness, resilience, and the unshakable belief that truth always prevails. Naria's legacy was not just in the lessons she imparted, but in the love and protection she offered. The girls who once felt like nobody now felt like somebody, their hearts filled with purpose. And in her presence, they saw not just a leader, but a living testament to the power of never giving up, no matter the odds. And as for the small solar-powered camera that had once been Baba Kwame's gift, it sat on Naria's shelf. She never forgot the role it played in unmasking the truth. It was more than just a device. It was a symbol of how even the smallest act of faith, like a single seed planted in the ground, could grow into something monumental. The gods, in their infinite wisdom, had many eyes, even digital ones. Sometimes the truth didn't need to be shouted, it just needed to be seen. Zelima, on the other hand, had long since faded from memory. Her rise had been swift, fueled by lies and envy, but her fall was just as swift. Banished to a distant land, she had become a shadow of the girl she once was, forgotten and ignored. The village had no room for those who thrived on deceit, and so she became a wanderer, lost in her own bitterness. As the seasons changed, Ndala thrived under Naria's leadership. The seeds of compassion she planted grew into a beautiful garden of success and unity. The village that had once turned its back on her now looked to her as a guiding light. Naria had bloomed, not just in strength, but in grace, turning every hardship she faced into an opportunity to uplift others. And so, the story of Naria became a legend in Ndala, one of betrayal, redemption, and the triumph of truth. They tried to bury her with lies, the villagers would say, but they didn't know she was a seed, and when the truth rained down, she bloomed brighter than ever before. If you've been touched by Naria's incredible journey of betrayal, strength, and triumph, then you know how powerful the truth can be. Just like Naria, we all face moments where lies and deceit seem to have the upper hand. But remember, truth always finds its way to the surface. And with resilience and courage, we can rise above even the toughest challenges. Naria's story reminds us that no matter how dark the path may seem, the light of truth and justice will always shine through. Just like the seeds of kindness she planted, each one of us has the power to bloom, even in the harshest of circumstances. If this story inspired you, touched your heart, or made you believe in the strength of truth, please don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with those who need a reminder of hope and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of courage and triumph. Your support means everything to us, and we're so grateful for each one of you. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter the challenge, the truth will always set you free. Keep shining,